Welcome to 99.4 with me, Neil Manthorpe, and back in South Africa, my colleague Lungani Zama. Zams, I tell you what, I've been at all 7 post-isolation test matches that South Africa have played at Lords, and there's one common theme. 5 of them have resulted in victories. And there's a kind of sense of frustration that South African players have ever since the first victory in 1994. And it's understandable, of course, that all the attention is focused on what England did wrong rather than how well South Africa played. And they were brilliant. I mean, all of the attention, I have to say, has been on the 4-man fast bowling attack for South Africa. And it is one of the most exciting that I can recall. But I suppose it's understandable when you focus on the shortcomings of England. It was the third least number of balls that they've ever faced in a defeat in a home test match. They didn't bat 90 overs in 2 innings combined. And what's been the reaction at home to this fast bowling lineup, given that they're all under 30?
Yeah, hi Neil, and hi to all the listeners out there. Firstly, I think very pleasantly surprising to get to day 3 and you're planning your weekend without watching cricket. We expected a lot from England, given the way that they played this summer with the much hallowed Bazball. But South African attack, you can't take any credit away from them. The way that they stuck to their guns and just fast and aggressive and resolute in line and length. So pleasing to see, and I think very well led, obviously, by KG Rabada, who I saw him just before he left, actually, because he was rested for the opening part of the tour, and he said the one thing that he wants to do out of this tour is put his name up in the same place that Makai Antini did, and he was obviously very keen to take 10, but others beat him to it in that second dig. But the fact that he got 5. And his celebration afterwards, making the honours board sign to make sure that his name is up there very quickly, just shows you how much it means to every South African to go to Lords and perform well, and to start such an important series on such a good note. So yeah, South Africans woke up to very, very good news on Saturday.
And the other thing, Sams, is that the victory almost perfectly or imperfectly coincided with the release of the new ICC Future Tours program, which, just took such a massive bite out of the celebrations. Dean Elgar was, I wouldn't say inconsolable, but he made it very clear after the test match how disappointed he was that South Africa will be playing just 28 tests in the next 4 or 5 year cycle. It's the bare minimum. And yet, as disappointing as it is, and it goes beyond disappointing for very, very many people, the truth is, and I've written this several times now, what choice was there actually when Poletsi Moseki, the chief executive of Cricket South Africa, speaks to all the cricket people, and they say, right, what you need to do is make sure we play lots of test matches. But we can't play any in January and February because we've got a new league. And we can't play any during the IPL because we need to stay on good terms with the BCCI. And we can't... I mean, what could the guy do other than... I mean, we should be grateful that he's managed to fit in commitments to the World Test Championship.
It's such a hollow blow, like you say. I mean, the fact that it was such a good result and then suddenly you get this terrible news that basically says like you say, you've got the bare minimum test matches to possibly play. I mean, Cricket South Africa has had its issues and for several seasons now, as we well know. And, the administration, the likes of Poletsi, are trying their best in trying circumstances, but it just shows you how far that stock has fallen, tumbled actually. The fact that this can happen, and you feel sorriest for the players because test matches for so many still mean more than anything, especially when you have such a special occasion like you did at Lords, where you play so well and you're looking forward to the next, and that's the news that you get as you finish the test match. But it is a sign of the time zone. South Africa have to rebuild their stock Going to Australia, going to England is not something you can take for granted anymore, and it's terribly sad. But you've got to celebrate victories like that happened in this first test even more, because you just don't know how many more of them you're going to have in your career.
Elgar said at one point after the test match that he wants his players to push even harder and to raise their game and to even greater heights. And he said, I want them all to play every test match as if it's their last. It's a familiar turn of phrase, but with a bitter twist of reality.
Absolutely. It's, yeah, like you say, very, very bittersweet. And, Dean is one of those guys who always tries to speak tongue in cheek. He approaches life much the way that he approaches opening the batting in South Africa. You never know what's going to come next. But he must be. I mean, he's leading a team that started to rebuild itself the way they did against India in the last South African summer, the way that they were expected to be turned over by England. You feel like you're starting to get some sort of momentum. And then the one thing that you cherish, the one thing that matters more to him than anything else, that South African test cap, you're told you're going to wear it less than any other test playing player in world cricket. It's got to hurt a man like that who's worked so hard, come from so far, and is now leading a side that looks like it can challenge any team, home and away. It's an exciting time to be leading that team, and the fact that you're not going to play as often as you really should must really hurt.
It's interesting. There's an old phrase in Test cricket. Well, I suppose it applies to all cricket, and that is, if you can't score a lot of runs, just make sure you score enough. And this, I have to say, going all the way back to 1992, the first Test series post isolation. This is as exciting. I won't use the word good because I don't really know what it means, but this is as exciting a bowling attack as I can remember. The last time there was a quick hostile left armer, it was Brett Schultz, and we've got to go back to 1993 for the best of him. And Keshav Maharaj as well, very, very underrated part. But so there is an issue with the batting, isn't there? I mean, we compare this team to that of 2008 or 2012 with A.B. de Villiers, Graham Smith, Jacques Kallis, Hashim Amla. I mean, that was a great batting lineup in anybody's language and any money in any era. So this is not a great team. But having said that, we would all be talking about the beginning of a new era with the way South Africa dismantled England at Lords, and yet we're not, because they don't play it. They won't come back to England, at least not to play England, for at least 5 years. They might well come back next year to play the final of the World Test Championship. So, I mean, like I said, it's bittersweet. So on the subject of the bowling attack, though, Zams, I want to speak to you about Lungi Ngidi and his place in the four-man pace attack, because the plans are put together on these tours, aren't they? Sort of weeks before they even arrive. Okay, this is what we're going to try and do. This is our whole big picture plan. And there was talk before well before the series began of Simon Harmer playing the second Test match at Old Trafford, because it does turn there. And by the way, again, all the talk was about big, bold, brave England, and playing the exciting cricket. What about selection? South Africa are the team that played 4 fast bowlers and a spinner, and not the 6 specialist batsmen. Anyway, am I right in thinking that if Harmer does play, and I don't think he will, but if it's really dry and looks like turning, would he come in for Lungi Ngidi?
Yeah, it's a great problem to have for the selectors, and reward, I suppose, for, like you say, their courage in trusting their bowlers to take 20 wickets, which they did, and the batsmen, the specialist batsmen, and what they keep calling bits and pieces batsmen in the lower order to make enough runs to win a match, and that's exactly what they did. You kind of give people greater accountability to do their jobs. And at the end of the day, if the batting gets bowled out for 150 and you lose the test, you can kind of point to them and say, not one of you made a substantial score. So it does eliminate a lot of confusion, because batters must make enough runs and the bowlers will take 20 wickets, as happened. But like you say, if they do go to Old Trafford and it is in this height of this greatest drought, a hell of a summer that England have been having, it's impossible to leave out the best performing finger spinner in English cricket for the last decade almost. Then Lungi Ngidi will probably be in danger, because he is probably a bit similar to, he sort of straddles the lane between Anrich Nokia and KG Rabada in terms of big and fast. Maybe doesn't do as much of the ball as KG, not quite as fast as Anrich. So you probably would look to him, but he took important wickets. And as they say, he bowls a heavy ball. And, there is a place for that. And when you keep on having guys running at you at 85, 90 miles an hour, there's no relent. As KG rests, Lungi comes in. As he rests, Marco Jansen comes in, and it's relentless. Those are the things that hurry good batsmen to make bad decisions. So they'd have to think long and hard to leave out Lungi Ngidi, because I think the energy and just the physicality that he brings to the crease is tough to ignore, especially when it's worked so well at Lords. But obviously Harmer, we know his record, we know what he's done for Essex, and we know what he's done in all conditions in England over the last 4 or 5 years. So he'd be chomping at the bit. I mean, we saw what he did in tandem with Keshav when South Africa played Bangladesh here. We never thought we'd see South Africa play 2 frontline spinners in a test match on South African soil, but as they say, the times are changing, and the selectors are changing too. So, we'll see what they do this week, but they are good problems to have.
Sticking with Ngidi just for a moment, he was speaking a couple of days before the Lord's Test match about his role in the team, and he made it very clear that he, I think in consultation with the captain and the coaching staff, had accepted that his role had been redefined, and he used the word words providing control. So, in other words, you really don't want to shackle Rabada in any way. I mean, you don't want him to be saying, hey, KG, we don't need you going at 4 and over. Just forget that. Even less so for Norkia. And you really, I mean, he was going at 5 or 6 and over. Who cares? He was taking the wind out of the England batsmen's sails and knocking them over. And frankly, if you take that many wickets that quickly, who cares how much they cost? And again, it's exactly the same with Marco Jansen. I mean, you don't want to be telling your 6'8" left arm seamer bowling at close to 90 miles an hour to worry about bowling dot balls. So I don't know whether Ngidi took it upon himself or whether he was asked to take on that role, but he did see, and it was odd because he took the new ball. I mean, ordinarily you'd expect him to come on and provide control, bowling first or second change, but he did seem to be bowling within himself. He can bowl quicker. And he bowled fewer overs than the other 3. And we both know, you and I, how much Dean Elgar loves to control. That's what he often looks to Keshav Maharaj for. That's why he likes to have him in the team so much, particularly in the first innings. So yeah, it's looking very much like an unchanged 11, no matter what the pitch looks like.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful selflessness from Lungi, because, like you say, we know him to be able to bowl just as fast and be just as hostile, and be a wicket-taking fast bowler. That's, when he burst into the scene against India all those years ago, that's what we knew him for. So to humble yourself in the circumstances and bowl maybe at 80% of the pace, but have so much more control and keep up the relentless pressure on the England middle order is, it's a feather in his cap, the fact that you can read the room and say, KG's on fire this test match. Anrich Nokia has been waiting to be let loose on these England batsmen who apparently can play fast bowling. And Marco Jansen is Marco Jansen. And you say, well, we need somebody to calm the farm and keep the control that Dean so, craves every test match, every session, because that's the pressure that then leads to wickets. It shows his maturity as a cricketer, and I think his years in the IPL and working with different style of bowlers and bowling coaches has really made him a truly international cricketer. And if you can do that and be satisfied with taking just a couple of still very good wickets, but be happy just to sort of do the legwork and do the engine room and make sure that the control that Keshav exerts is not let loose when the ball is chucked to the seamers. It really complemented the rest of the attack, who, like you said, didn't pay any mind to what the economy rate was and how many shots were being played at them, because they knew that on the other end, it was an absolute drought. They couldn't get away. He was metronomic. And when you have that and you have that trust, then as Anush Nokia, you can literally throw caution to the wind and really ramp it up. And he did that. And so did KG. So, yeah, it would be very, very hard for Lungi to accept being dropped for the next test when he himself has taken the responsibility of controlling. And he did it so well, and it's worked so well for the team. So why would you change it?
I want to wander off onto a wonderful diversion with you now and talk a little bit more just about Ngidi. For those viewers and listeners who may not know his story particularly well, or if at all, other than the fast bowler that they see on the cricket field, and you obviously know him very well. You come from the same part of South Africa. I think of him these days as a sort of accidental activist. He became the sort of, he never set out to become the spokesman for the team in on subjects of Black Lives Matter and taking a knee and solidarity in the fight for equal opportunities and all of those things. He just happened to. I think it was his turn to do a press conference, and somebody asked him a question about it, and he answered honestly and said, "I think it's a conversation that we should have." And suddenly he found himself as the leader, and was labelled an activist, and I mean, he's not unhappy about that, I assume. He's perfectly happy to talk about it. He's not apologetic about being the poster boy of racial harmony in the team. I mean, but it's not something he set out to do, is it?
No, far from it. And like you say, it was his turn. And his turn just so happened to come on a day when there was a lot going on in the world, and questions were being asked of sportsmen that are not usually asked. And as he does, he fronted up and, said his piece. And that, was the domino effect of that was the conversation that ultimately led to the hearings about South African cricket's, historical imbalances. So he was the trigger inadvertently, but he never shied away from that responsibility. He never shied away from owning the fact that he is the cricketer that he is now, because doors have been opened by people who've had to sacrifice and endure, far more than he has. Not to say that he's not suffered in his life, because he's had a very tough upbringing, but his talent has taken him to places that he couldn't have dreamt of. And he lost his father a few years ago, but his father, did live to see him rise to become the man that he is, that so many people around the world now see as this man mountain of a gentle soul who bowls and wins IPL titles and takes, important wickets for his country. But he knows where he comes from, and he knows what he represents, and he knows just how many have come before him and never had the opportunities and the blind luck. I mean, he says it himself. It was blind luck that he happened to meet the right people who put him in the right schools and gave him the opportunities to become everything. If he hadn't gone to a Hilton college, he might not have had the nutrition to be able to carry this hulking figure that he is to the crease, and he might have broken down like Mfuneko Ngam did all those years ago, because he just didn't have the same opportunities. So he's very aware. He's a student of the game, and he's a young boy of a modern South Africa that understands just how tough this place was just a couple of decades ago if you happen to be born in the wrong place, in the wrong color. So he's aware, and it's not a conversation that he shirks. And I think he's one of several in that room. Kagiso Rabada being another, Andile Petluwayo being another, who don't shy. Temba Bavuma, as we saw in the T20 World Cup. They're aware of their responsibilities on and off the field, and the fact that they have to be these voices and these lights to
to those who are still scared to have these conversations and confront situations that make you awkward or make you uncomfortable, make you not want to play cricket the next day, whether you're playing at under 11 Cs or you're playing in international cricket, because there's a conversation that's happening in the change room that makes you uncomfortable, or you feel like you can't express yourself in your own language. These are things that a lot of cricketers in South Africa have gone through for decades in silence. And by simply answering the questions that he was asked in that press conference, it triggered a far deeper and far more urgent conversation for South African cricket to have. And I think I speak for many when I say that all of South African cricket is in a better place, in a healthier place, on the back of that conversation. So he can be proud, whatever he goes on to achieve. He can be proud that he opened more doors, for those who come after him, to be even happier South African cricketers, wherever they go, whether they're male, female, wherever they come from. You can come from a tough home with no financial backing and rise to the highest offices, and that's credit to him. It's credit to his parents. It's credit to his school. It's credit to his teammates for giving him the courage to do that and not back off and say, no, I was taken out of context. Yes, I absolutely said that. Yes, I absolutely meant that. And yes, I've traveled a road that many of you just don't know. But if you want to know, I'm happy to talk, because I haven't always been able to, and I have not always been allowed to. And the fact that I've answered one question and it's triggered a dozen former cricketers who have no idea about my life to start casting judgment and telling me that I'm a privileged kid who went to Hilton. Most of them don't even know the story of how he got to Hilton. It was blind luck. It was his talent and a parent who could afford to fund him, to say, if my son is going and you've such great friends and you're such a great sportsman, you deserve to go too, because I know your parents can't. And I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to make sure that every single Saturday that I go up and watch you play, I'm going to take your father so he watches you. So you're not the spare child who's just playing and doesn't have a father figure or a parent figure watching him grow and watching him win matches at a junior level. It's a remarkable story of transformation, of unity. It's an example of what South Africa can become, or any place can become, when those who have more give to those who have less, and sort of equal the playing field, so to speak. And his story, he's gone on to far bigger things than that childhood friend that they went to Hilton together. But I can assure you that both of them are richer for the fact that friendship took them both to a place where they could go to a school like Hilton and have the life experiences, and they'll be friends for life. And credit to that family that looked at him and said, here's a kid who can fly the South African flag high, because he's just got gifts that you can only be born with. And the fact that it's happened and he's got to where he is, you can only be proud of him.
To have memories growing up as a young boy living in a one-roomed house. His father was a petrol pump attendant initially, before he got a job on the maintenance team, didn't he, at a junior school, which resulted in him getting a place to that junior school. But to come from humble backgrounds like that, and then to emerge out of Hilton, which, for those who don't know, is one of the most expensive, one of the wealthiest, if not the most expensive and wealthy private. It is the most, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I can't, I've got quite a vivid imagination, but I'm afraid I can't imagine what that would feel like, to come from as humble a background like that, and then to emerge from Hilton. And he does, he looks like sounds, even with his posh boy accent, he was, he looks and sounds privileged, which I suppose he was lucky enough to get privilege. But if I do try to imagine that, I would want to tell people all the time where I came from and what can be possible. He had a lot of luck, didn't he? And he talks also about, people say, well, if it works that well, putting talented kids through scholarships to private schools, why not just carry on doing that? If it, I think only one of the black players in the last 20 years hasn't gone to a private school. But Ngidi speaks a lot about that not being the solution. He says, I was lucky. I don't want people to have to rely on luck. I want everybody to have the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it can't be a sustainable system when you have to have, these privileged schools taking people and changing their lives and changing their circumstances, and that's the only way you're going to produce first class cricketers, never mind international cricketers. And he's absolutely right. And part of the responsibility obviously falls on government institutions and administration of the game, but it's a conversation that people have circled around for ages, that it needs urgent attention. It can't be that only a handful of schools across South Africa have produced all the players that have gone on to play Test cricket for this country. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. And yes, it's difficult because there's the historical imbalances then play into the fact that there's no room for facilities in every single school. But it's something that needs to change. Rugby for a long time was similar, but it's changed. It's changed all the time. You find remarkable stories of people that come from the most desolate corners of South Africa that have a path and they can look at it and see it. Lukhanyo is a similar story to Lungi Ngidi. Magazole Mapimpi has an even more harrowing story when you look at where he came from. So it is possible. And when you put structures in place that make sure that the net is cast far wider and less slips through those gaps, then you do start having a bigger pool. We spoke last time about just how many South Africans are around the world playing cricket, not just for South Africa but for different countries, making their way, whether it's a Devon Conway or playing for Ireland or playing for Scotland or playing wherever. They're there because the pool of talent in this country when it comes to cricket or sport in general is incredible. It's an insatiable appetite that's bred from a strong school sports system that allows Ngidi. I mean, he was a rugby player. He wanted to be a rugby player more than a cricketer. And the physical burden just meant that, he kept on breaking down. And then he realized as he was about to finish high school that actually I can propel a ball from 22 yards and probably do a lot more damage with a piece of leather than I can trying to run and match these massive Afrikaans and massive Xhosa boys who come just blessed with rugby talent. And thank goodness, for the game, for all of us, that he went the right way. We don't need another Siya Kolisi. We've already got one of those. But it's important, it's important to open these doors, and it's important to keep encouraging the next Lungisani Ngidi to come through and not feel ashamed of his circumstances and not feel lesser of a person, never mind a cricketer, because he can't afford his own boots at a certain age because his parents just don't have the means. You've got to close that gap, because when you close it, you open up so many more possibilities for South Africa to unearth world champions.
Okay. I was going to say we can talk about this for hours. Fortunately, we do have hours. We've got many, many episodes to come on 99.4. So it's a subject that we'll talk a lot more about in the days, weeks, months, and maybe years to come. So let's just go back to Old Trafford very quickly. I'm not there yet. I'll be driving up tomorrow morning. Oh, by the way, do you know how much it costs on the train to get from London to Manchester, Sams?
I do. It's about £90 if you don't book it in advance, because I had to do it when I was there a couple of years ago to go to the Liverpool Champions League parade, and I lived in Manchester for 3 years, so I know very well. I'm very envious of where you're going next.
I tell you what, Sam, that was a few years ago. Prices have gone up, my friend. £200. £200.
Ouch.
You can fly to Spain and have an all expenses paid holiday for a week for the same money that it takes to get to Manchester on the train. So fortunately, a friend's lent me his car. Mind you, petrol's pretty expensive. Okay, so Zach Crawley and Alex Lees opening the batting. So and Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum both said that they didn't expect consistency from Zach Crawley. I'm sure you must have seen those quotes. He's not that kind of player. He'll win matches for England, but we don't expect consistency from him. I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh. It's just I've never heard that before about any cricketer. I thought consistency was the holy grail for every cricketer.
We've not got the Bazball manual, Manthorpe. so we can't speculate on their thinking. It's different. It's very different, and it's it's on in line with the way McCullum has approached things thus far. But I suppose different teams have different strokes and expect different things from their players. Your openers consistency is the first hallmark, which is why South Africa have Dean Elgar and Cyril Avria now, because they find that there's a steady income of runs from one, if not both of them, every other test match. You need that stability. It's the cornerstone of building a test innings. But South Africans don't play baseball. They just play regular red ball fair.
Okay, so I'll ask you for a prediction, and I'll prepared to wear egg on my face as well, and I'll also go with one. I think that South Africa are perfectly capable of being bowled out for 165 or 149. I actually think it'll happen, and I don't think it'll affect the result either, because I think their bowling is so much more incisive and hostile and wicket taking than England's. I see another couple of quick test matches. Maybe not so much at the Oval, because that's pretty flat there, and I think somebody will get in, and maybe a couple of guys will get in and make hundreds. I see a very short test coming up at Old Trafford. But I tell you what, Sams, I wouldn't have thought this just a couple of months ago. Not watching England chase down 374 against India at Edgbaston. But okay, I'm doing it. I'm going 3-0.
Wow. There's a thing called commentator's curse. But I mean, you've got a long drive to Manchester to think about the words that you've just uttered. I think England will respond. Whether or not that response is enough to win is hard to say, because that South African attack does look really, really good. And I think Anrich Nokia and KG especially, that they live for test matches like this, and the ability to change a game in a session like they do, is what makes them special. And they would have seen a brittle side to the England exterior that they showed early in the summer, and they probably can't wait to get back at them. But England do have the better middle order probably on paper, and I don't see Joe Root failing 4 times in a row. I just don't see it. Without the shackles of captaincy, I think he'll want to respond. So I definitely wouldn't want to say South Africa are going to lose the test match, but I think it's going to be a lot closer. I don't see it happening quickly. I think they'll go back. Joe Root will resort back to type and play proper 5-day solid grinded out cricket, make a slow 100 if need be, and see if they can wear this attack down, because at the moment they're trying to fight fire with fire. And South Africa just had too much firepower, and if you play that many strokes, you're going to flash out and you're going to get out and you look a bit silly, and that's what happened to England. And I think they'll have some private conversations that say, look, it was exciting early in the summer, but let's go back to a few basics of how to approach a test match and see where we are at the halfway point, and then maybe do a bit more baseball. You can't just be that gung-ho against such a good attack.
Okay, I just want to say that my prediction was honestly, truly dispassionate and unemotional. It's not based on anything other than a look at the personnel on paper. And put it this way, if somebody said England will win the series 2-1, I can see how that can happen. And I wouldn't be entirely surprised. So really, it purely is dispassionate. I don't think that Alex Lees and Zach Crawley are going to give them a solid start. I think there's a very strong chance that England are going to be 20 for 2. It's a tough position to recover from. So I think South Africa will win the series 3-0, but let's call it a hunch. I sound like I'm backpedaling. No, I'm not.
Don't
3-0.
Don't backpedal, man.
All right, Sams.
We will chat again after South Africa go 2-0 up. I look forward to it immensely. Drive safe and get a cheese puff.
I will
on
pass
the
on your best to Manchester. I'll do that, and give me one venue where I can go and salute you and have a drink and raise a glass for old time's sake to Manchester?
Man, there's several venues where I've left my name gloriously somewhere, ingloriously in most others. Deansgate Locks. Anyway, on the locks,
Okay.
I've had
All right.
a famous evening. So yeah, please go and have one for me. Don't mention my name probably, but just go and have one for me anyway.
I will do. Okay, chat soon.
Cheers, manners. Drive safe.